This is going to be a workshop. So what that means is that you'll be turning and talking to one another. When that happens, if you're using your headphones, you'll have to go DJ style, like stick one ear off. You look really cool. Otherwise, yeah, if you can hear me, it's up to you how you would like to work with this. What I'm excited about is that the topic for today is going to be how to be a next-gen leader. What's exciting about that is you're going to leave here with some really easy tools, small changes that will lead to a very big impact. So it makes your life easier, it lets you gain buy-in and gain alignment really quickly, no matter what type of leadership this refers to. So meaning whether it's personal leadership, whether it's team leadership, company leadership, all the same. So what I want to do is I just want to start by sharing a small story. This story really impacted me. It's actually a true story. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers on a common mission. They're on the ground. You can imagine the scene that's laid out before you. They're on the ground. They're trying to get this thing accomplished. I don't know what exactly it was, and what we have actually is the two commanders, these teams, and they're in a separate room looking at drone footage. Okay, so they can actually see their team in action. The common thing on the ground is that they're both trying to collaborate to get this mission accomplished. What isn't in common is the way the two leaders, the commanders, are actually interacting with their teams. On the one hand, we have the Ranger, the Army Ranger commander, and he's being very active. He's saying things like, okay, move left, flank right, I don't even know the words, but he's basically issuing out lots of commands to be able to coach his team. And you might say, awesome, good leader, right? But let me contrast with what's happening on the other side, the Navy SEALs commander. And very different here, the Navy SEALs commander is saying nothing. So eventually they start to look at each other and they're like, what's going on? The Navy SEALs is equally as surprised at the way the behavior of the commander, of the Ranger is. And the Ranger is like, what, are you gonna do your job here? What's up? What we see is a difference in leadership style. And when you speak to the commander of the SEALs, what he says in this case is, my team was trained to be a team. They know how to innovate, how to adapt, how to be agile to me right now. And there's something beautiful in that. And so what I want to do to talk with you today about is how do we actually, what type of leadership style do we want to be a part of? Like if you ask yourself, what team would you rather be a part of? And what type of leader do you want to be? And I would suggest to you in today's day and age, we're going to have to find a way to create that type of agility where we're actually not necessarily needed in the moment of truth. But before that, we're very much needed. So that's what today's session is going to be about. I'd like to invite you to take a moment and fill in on your worksheet just T1. So just T1 and T2, nothing more. And we're gonna think fast, not hard. So fill it in quickly. I got a lot to cover with you in a very short amount of time. So just T1 and T2. Sure. Anybody else need a pen?
Are we allowed to use our phones and just put the question numbers on our phones?
You can do that as well. So the question is whether you can use your phones. I would suggest it's better to use paper because we're going to be using underlining it and stuff. So actually, no. Write it down. There are pens in your bags. There's a pen in the bag that's on your seat. All right, just 30 more seconds. Doing it fast. And you can continue to fill it in as I talk. I think there's pen. You're not finding a pen either? There were pens in the bags, yes. Anybody for the Work Awesome team can get us some extra pens? All right, we've got one pen found. Raise your hand if you need a pen. All right, so okay, that's good. We got one pen and one person needs a pen. Perfect. All right, great. So you can continue to fill that out as we go. The first question that's on that sheet, name someone who has good leadership skills. This question is really quite interesting for many different reasons, and I'll say from a personal reason. Okay, so quick background on myself. My name's LeeAnn. I'm the CEO, the co-founder of LifeLabs Learning, and my background is I have my PhD in cognitive psychology. Ideas transfer from one person to another. which means, of course, the topic of leadership is really interesting in that regard. And so the other beautiful thing about that is what LifeLabs gets to do. We get to go into different companies. We train executives there, we train managers, we train teams in general. But look, take a look at that list there. That's just a few of the many companies we work with. And in doing so, the reason I'm bringing this up is to share a very unique thing. We get to get access to all different types of structures, situations, hierarchies, non-hierarchies, whatever. And we get to ask a similar question while we're there. On your sheet right there, we'll say, who here is known to be great at, and you can fill in the blank. So maybe it'll be being a great leader, being a great manager, or being a great communicator, being very persuasive. Anybody who gets named again and again, we bring into our labs. We're based originally out of the University of Vienna in Austria, as well as Columbia Business School. So those 2 locations. And in our labs, what we can do, if you can imagine this picture right here, you got invited in because you were named. And what we can do is all kinds of different things. Like, for example, we have scales in the legs of the chairs. So the seat you're sitting in right now. Unfortunately, I couldn't rig it up, but if I could have, I would have rigged it up. We would be able to see patterns, your motion energy. And in a second, I could tell when you're gaining interest or losing interest in what I'm saying through your micro movements. Okay, that's something really small, but there's a lot of other stuff we could be testing. Okay, so what's interesting about this is the great managers are in that room. We're trying to see what are they doing differently through a bunch of different scenarios. And we start to see the great leaders, they're doing something very different in 4 major factors. So if we do a factorial analysis around the behaviors, we land upon these 4 things. What's beautiful about that is it simplifies complexity for you. It tells you that if you're going to spend your time learning, focus on these 4 areas because they're going to definitely make the quickest difference the fastest. So that's really nice. By the way, the effective one-on-ones is kind of like a capstone because where you do your coaching, your feedback, your prioritizing, where you pull feedback, ideally would be in that one-on-one. So it's a kind of an interesting way of using that moment. Okay, so for us, that was interesting. We're like, cool, we're going to make workshops out of that. We did 2-hour workshops in each one of those. Awesome, really fun. But then this creeping question kept coming to us. What if there's an easier way, an even easier way? And that's where this research starts to kind of play itself out. The question for us is, what if there's a tipping point skill? If you learn this one thing, it's going to make you be able to much more quickly master those skills right there. And the good news, the exciting news is there are tipping point skills. And so today I'm going to share them with you. We're going to do kind of like a fast tour. I'm going to be covering 3 of them. They've got weird names to make them be more memorable to you. We're going to be talking about Q-stepping, getting to curious, de-blurring, and extracting the learning. There are many more tipping point skills. I've just picked 3 here that can work in this format. And so we're going to start with the get to curious. And with that, I mean, if you think to yourself, what does it actually mean, get to curious? If an alien came down from outer space and like landed right here on the Work Awesome stage, standing here right now and says, what does it mean to feel curiosity, the emotion? What I want to do is our first step. I would like for you all to stand up right now and touch on your body where you feel your curiosity. So put your hand on your body where you feel your curiosity. Imagine you can't wait to see what the next slide is. You're really curious. Okay, touch. Now turn around and look at each other because it's kind of interesting to see. We've got chins, we've got throats, we've got hearts. Yeah, all right, you can take a seat. I've done that for 2 reasons. One is it's just so interesting to see the variety. Also, it gets to be a spot where you can actually learn how to access your own curiosity because it's really easy for me to say, get curious, but it's really hard to do when you're under pressure. You know, like you take a moment, put a little bit of pressure on top, give yourself a deadline. It's really hard to be curious when you're like, you want to move forward. But great leaders can turn their behaviors on at a given moment. So what I want to give you today is some tools for that. They're slightly weird. It's part of what we do at LifeLabs to try and find the weird thing that sticks for the brain. But they work. So here's the I want to share with you our research around the 20 questions technique. We're going to do this in pairs. It gets a little sloppy. This is how it is. That's what a good workshop is about. So what you'll need to do is you'll be just right, whoever's sitting closest to you, you can just like kind of point to them and be like, you're my partner. Okay, only groups of 2. If you're by yourself, that's okay. And if not, you can try and move around, find somebody else. I'll give you instructions in a moment. Okay, but what I'd like for you to do, so everyone hopefully has somebody, if not, you're on your own, that's okay. I would like for you to use the back of your sheet. Okay, it's blank. Use the back of your sheet, and we're gonna do this. You together, one of you is gonna be the scribe. the two of you are going to try to generate questions, at least 20 in a 2-minute time frame. So the scribe, you're going to have to write really fast, okay? And you have to take one headphone piece off so that you can hear if you have it on, okay? Okay, but what'll happen is you're going to be writing down these questions, and I'll tell you what the topic is, okay? But first, any questions on what we're doing? You're not answering questions, you're just generating as many questions as you can, particularly about the topic I'm going to give you. Okay, I'm going to be a timekeeper, and you should just simply start shouting out questions. Don't copy from each other. I want these to be like your questions. All right, and you can describe words. Okay, timer's getting ready. The topic is the pen in your scribe's hand. 20 questions about the pen in their hand. Go. Just start writing yourself if you yeah.
The person who made it.
That's good.
How many strokes can you make with it before it runs out of time?
30 seconds left. Keep it going, keep it going.
Well, this one's about this pen, which is what do they have planned for the 1.1? It's probably just it's 1.0.
Time, pens down, pens down. You all are like inordinately happy about your 20 questions. All right, so here's the reason why I had you do this. Okay, so come on back to me. Can you hear me through the headphones? Okay, great. So here's our research around this, and it's a bit messed up because I'm having you do it in pairs and so on. It's a bit better when you do it on your own. Right around question 7, 8, or 9, we see, particularly there, the quality shifts. Take a look at what you wrote down. Reach around 8 or 9. Better, better. Good question. Yeah. So let me. Anybody willing to share one of your what 8 or 9 was? Okay, over here.
So my pen says feminist on it, and
Ha.
our question number 9 is, can misogynists use it?
Oh, there we go. Nice. And back there. How many sales units? Okay, that's very particular. Yeah. So how many sales units? Nice. And I think one more hand. What would you trade it for? Nice. Cool. So here's the thing. Right around 7, 8, or 9, the quality shifts. And what I can tell you is because we actually start getting past the normal questions, like what color is it? You can see what color it is. You're looking at it, right? And we get into a space of wherever you touch, right? The curiosity mode. Now, what is useful about that in the everyday work world? Well, I tell you, it took 2 minutes, and it's one of those hacks where if you're about to go into a difficult meeting, you're about to do strategy session, whatever it might be, there's tension in the air between you and another person. If we sit down and we make ourselves write out 20 questions, it is unexplained ability to get us into a different way of thinking. Okay, and that's what I mean by accessing your curiosity. Now, if you take a look at my next suggestion to you, and I'm only going to do this for 1 minute just to save myself a little bit of time, I'd like for you to think about your manager or a colleague or even a loved one or a friend. You pick wherever it is. And now just start writing a few questions there. We won't even get to 8 or 9. That's okay. I just want you to play with writing some questions you're curious about that person. I'll give you a moment to do that. And you're just doing that singly. You don't need to do it together. Sorry, I didn't say that right. On your own, on your own. Okay, it's good enough. That was just 1 minute. Just circle the one you find most interesting. The one you'd actually kind of get curious to know what they would say to that. Just circle that one. Can someone share? Yeah? No? You did? Can you repeat the question? I just couldn't hear. What from the past?
What has influenced him from the past that continually makes him make the same
Yeah. Yeah. So he's asking what's influenced them from the past that leads them on the same decision pathway, right? Lovely question. Back there. What keeps you up at night? Oh my gosh, when someone asks you that, you can't help but be like, oh, thank you for asking. I don't know if you want to hear the answer, but yeah, and we'll go here and then we'll do one back there.
Why do you think we're not connecting on a deeper level?
Whoa, why do you think we're not connected? Oh, lovely. And back there? Are you really working for the CIA? That is actually an important question. And the answer, yes. Yeah, so you get the idea here. It's, everything I'm going to share with you is not going to be revolutionary, but it's kind of revolutionary how simple it is. So my call to action is to get into a questions mode. Now, with that, here's the assignment. Thinking questions. Ask yourself, what questions should I be asking? Ask your team. Wait, what questions should we be asking before we dive into this meeting, this strategy session? And with that, we start to increase in perceived leadership. So when we go back to our thing, you know, that what matters are these coaching, feedback, prioritization, effective one-on-ones. Those are the skills that matter. But the tipping point, what really shifts you into doing all those better, is your ability to ask good questions. So for me, that's when we get into next generational leadership, because we can simplify it into one thing and really get good at it. So with that, we could think about question quantity. We could think about question quality. This is one of the interesting parts of our research. We actually would go eavesdrop. Like right now, we could go, all of us, we could just be quiet and eavesdrop on the people. That'd be kind of fun. And we'd be counting the amount of questions that they're asking in an average 15-minute conversation. Let's just shout out the number. How many do you think it asks in an average 15, with average folks? So not people named as great managers or leaders. Yell out a number. 2. All right, so we've got somewhere ranging between 0 to 5. The people who yelled 2, like right on. So that's the average. Okay, now look at the difference. There's a 15-minute conversation. There's a difference of 10. Now, it doesn't sound like an interrogation. You might, right? But what's happening is the quality of the question shifts the other speak to the topic. So there's something kind of beautiful. It also confounds the variables too much. So the research gets super messy really fast because the other person's not being normal anymore because they're getting asked such good questions. Okay, but nevertheless, here's your mission. One more question than normal. As simple as that. It's like, what could I do right now? What kind of question could I ask? Prepare yourself and or in the moment pivot and be like, what could I ask here instead? So if you get a direct report, a colleague, whoever, a friend comes to you and says, hey, how should I handle this? You totally know how to handle it. Let's just say you do. An average leader would tell him what to do and tell it well. A great leader, an awesome leader, should say, would do something different. They would cue step. It's a term we made up at Life. I'm just going to step into a questions mode first. I can step into telling mode or I can step into questions mode. Whatever you want there. So for example, what are your thoughts on it so far would be a really great one for several reasons. This is also part of the research. We find, oops, okay, there's a weird shift. Ignore that. It helps you, first of all, to save time. So we make sure we actually understood his question, make sure that they actually said what they wanted to say, because often the presenting problem is not the real problem. So here, maybe he's actually asking you about workload, not about how to do the project, right? So it saves time. Okay, and then finally we empower them. That's where we get to that Navy SEALs effect. There's a funny moment last night. We had a speakers dinner, and I don't know if Jeremy's here. Jeremy, you here? No. I was sitting next to Jeremy from Cave Day, and Felix asked us a really interesting question. He came up and he said, "What's the future of work?" Right? And there was this moment, and first of all, Jeremy's answer cracked me up. He said, "Yes." That was his answer. What's the future of work? Yes. So very creative. But what I saw is around our table, this beautiful thing, of course, to add value, to give a good, smart response. But the folks at the table, which was really lucky for me, they didn't. There was a pause, and they were like, well, wait, I need to understand more about what you mean by that question. Okay, and that's actually the essence of good leadership. We don't waste time answering the wrong questions. So with that, we can say, well, what about question quality? There's the urge we have to step into questions mode rather than tell. But in terms of quality, I'm just going to name a few more small things before I move on to the next ones. We do have to think about whether it's open versus closed. What are you seeing right here, open or closed? Closed. Yeah, they're closed because answer. So we've got one option there. Now, how do we flip it into open? Somebody take question 1. How do we make that be open? Yeah, how do you like your new project? Or, yeah, what do you like? How are you feeling? If you want to be more neutral, right? So the interesting piece, look at that last one right there. Do you have any questions? I can tell you, this is my profession. If I want you to ask me questions, I will say, what questions do you have? If I don't want you to ask me questions, I will say, do you have any questions? And those who have burning questions will do it anyway, right? But the odds are very low that you will actually ask me a question. So you're gonna like do whatever you want with this, but I think it's interesting that actually your strategic choice of open versus closed will actually shift the conversational quality. So the action here is just being aware of the first words you're choosing. You could look at what you wrote down there. The questions you wrote about the pen, the questions you wrote about your friend or your partner or your manager, were they open or closed, right? So there's open. Be careful about why, because why actually causes a defensive response unless the person knows you really well. So they're good, but be careful. That's open versus closed. Let me just see. I'll keep us actually rolling. No, I'll pause. Ironically, any questions? And I'm not counting the amount of questions you ask. Any questions about the research so far or anything I have covered? Yes. Yes, right. Okay, so he's saying, can you talk about whether who is actually open? In some cases, it's not, because you've got like, it's a limited source. Now, if I say like, who in this room should we speak with, right? Then I'm opening a little bit more. So that's somewhere in between. It's just basically having the what and the how as your go-tos. If you would like to narrow the conversation and move it toward action, then do closed questions. They're totally good for that. And what I would suggest to you, next time you're on a call with somebody, next time you're having a conversation, it actually works really well to record yourself, because you start to see the kind of questions you ask, how many you ask, and the quality of your questions. So there's something in that that really gives us insight. All right, so we looked at your patterns. Now, back pocket questions, now that we've realized we should shift into open questions, there's lots. We spent a long time actually researching which ones work the best. I've put a few already on your sheet there. Put some more up here. You have to decide to actually have for yourself the mission of asking a different question regularly, and then you get in the habit of having agility. And what I mean by that is, if I keep doing the same question, I'm going to keep getting the same answer. So let's just say I stick with this one, what have we learned? And my team's like, well, a lot, right? And I'm like, okay, but can you name something? They're like, yeah, we just learned we should be more on time with things. And I'm just not getting the right answer that I was hoping for. Not spark. Then in that case, I'm going to have to shift to a different question category. So I want you to have a lot of back pocket options, is the main point. Okay. By the way, just a side note, since I think we're in kindred folk here in terms of being a little bit nerdy, one of the things that I do is I get from the Muji store, you can buy them. They're like little tiny flashcards, and they have a keychain around them. They're small. They're like the size of this clicker here. And there's a keychain here. And what I do is I write different questions on them for myself. In the morning, I will actually take and close my eyes and I'll be like, okay, what question does fate want me to have? Flip through, look at it, and then by the end of that question, that might be to the person at the deli at the corner. It might be my taxi driver. My poor husband, he's a last resort. So if I didn't get it asked, I'll be like home and I'll be like, hey, what were your decision criteria on where you went to eat today? And he's like, oh my God. He's like, he plays along very, very well. It's very nice. But the idea here is to train yourself to have that agility because very quickly you get very good at it. You don't need to think anymore. It's not hard. Okay, so that's my little spiel around questions. The main life lesson, this is not just for work, this is life. The idea is we want to make questions mode be the default mode. And what I mean by we love so much at LifeLabs, we step first into questions mode, then you can tell. I'm totally good with you telling, but only after you first ask one question. Okay, so that brings me to the end of point 1. I'm going to move us along to the second tipping point skill. The other word for this, by the way, because I think we have some psychologists in the audience, is behavioral units. So we're breaking down a larger skill like coaching or feedback into the behavioral unit, the tiny little element of it. Okay, and a deblur is a behavioral unit. So with that, what I mean by deblurring is picture, right? One half is clear and one half is a little blurry. We want to actually help make people's statements get clearer. So deblur them. What word up there is a word that can mean different things to different people? ASAP, right? Now, usually people are like, no, it just means as soon as possible. Yeah, I know, but what does it actually mean? If I said to you, can you get this to me ASAP, this email, I want you to answer my email ASAP. When do you expect that you should get it back? That you should get that email back to me? He's saying immediately, right? Anybody disagree with that? I see a lot of disagreements in the room. Yeah, what does it mean to you? Yeah. Yeah, So there's a lot of buzzwords in companies. When we go in and analyze companies, oh my God, like EOD, end of day, like there's so many of them, right? So the idea here is we want to deblur. Great leaders are in the habit, no matter what position you're in, is you're trying to find a way to get clean talking happening. So I'll give you some examples then. So, okay, well, first of all, the skill here that you can anchor is to mentally underline when you hear a word that actually could mean different things to different people. And that's your trigger, your if-then. The deblur looks like this. You just simply say, oh, just to double check, what does ASAP actually mean to you? Whatever words work for you, but you're clarifying that. With that, we start to get things like, if we see a statement like this, let's say you were a part of the HR team or whatever, and you've been asked to do this. It says, we need to give more clarity on career paths. Let's say your executive came to you and said that. Most people, average leaders, would be like, cool, we'll work on that. Great ones immediately be like, wait, okay, and what words are some blur words? Let's just shout out a few blur words there. Clarity and? Career. Yeah, and? Yeah, and? More, and? Yeah, let's give. And? We, who's we? Okay, this is basically one big blur, and that's the problem. We end up wasting our time because we think we're doing the right thing, but we're not in the end. Okay, so always do not waste your time with that. Deblur it. Okay, so even if I let you think about it for yourself right now, I'm not going to take the time to do this just because I'm a little bit short. If you think about what's important to you at the moment, you're able to start saying, you hear the words in your own head, and you can already start to deblur yourself. You could say to yourself, wait, like if I say, I want to, just be more strategic, and I'll be like, wait, brain, underline. What do you mean by strategic? And I'll be like, what do I mean by strategic, right? Actually, I mean proactive. What does proactive mean? It's kind of interesting how that flows. So great leaders are able to do what we call double touching, or call it double clicking if you're in the tech world. But the idea is you click down on the different words to make sure you really understand what those blur words mean. Take a look at what you wrote for your team mission statement. That was what you wrote on T2, if you had time to fill it in. Go through and see if there should be any underlines. I heard people saying, oh yeah. All right, and so the concept is everything okay? Yeah. The concept is that we want to, we want to be able to make sure that we're able to deblur that. 5 more. Cool, okay, I was like, am I off? I was like, I'll go really fast. Okay, all good. I also promised that I'd stop pacing, but I can't stop. So I'm very sorry to cameraman. He's waving me. It's okay. Okay. I just love this topic so much. It's really makes life better. So look at this. You get feels great, right? But not really, because in the end, we don't know what to do to repeat that behavior or diminish that behavior if it was constructive feedback. So we would be able to figure out that a good leader gives clean, specific, de-blurred feedback so that we know exactly what to specify in the future. And so if you're ever getting feedback like this, which we've all in our lives probably gotten, you need to be more proactive, you need to be more strategic, collaborative, be a better team player. Someone else yell out another word that often gets said? Creative. Yeah, be more creative, right? Interesting thing when we ping it back to them and say, well, okay, I definitely want to do that. Thank you for the feedback. I want to do that. Can you tell me what that word means to you? Can you tell me the behaviors that will be associated with it? Okay, and there's something beautiful in that because we don't sound defensive anymore. We sound curious, wherever you touch for your curiosity, right? So the concept, by the way, I touched here because I did this once, this session for kindergartners. So we're doing, not this, but it was question skills. Now, kindergartners are really good at questions, so I was like, this is fun, let's see what they do with it, right? And I did the alien was up there like you had, and I was like, touch your space where you feel curious. Really went like, boom, like this. And so of course, all the other kids are like dying laughing. And so I was like, why do you feel your curiosity there? And he's like, well, because it like pushes me. And so he's like, it makes me go. And I was like, it's kind of good. So anyway, that's why I could say wherever your curiosity is. But we want to clean that up, de-blur it. So life lesson 2, notice and clean the blur words in your company and create a culture of clean talking and clean thinking. Makes you stand out very, very quickly. My last thing is learning. I do want to pause for a moment. Actually, can I just ask, when am I, do I have 5 more minutes? Is it, oh, just wondering, when is it supposed to end? 2? Okay, so I think we'll be good. So what I'll do is, I'm gonna take, if there's 1 or 2 questions, I can do them kind of quickly, and then we could do the final thing, which actually takes a minute or so. Any questions, anything we covered so far? We've got to turn that on, the mic on. Yeah, so we've got a question back there in the back.
So I think deblurring is very powerful. I work in consulting. We use a lot of buzzwords without any real clarity as what we're trying to get at.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have a really good example of a blurred statement,
Yeah.
Deblurred, and sort of the outcomes of that.
Yes. Okay. So she's asking about how an example of a deblurred statement. For me, it's constantly feedback. So I get to read like performance review feedback all the time, and so the feedback might say something like, what I think is really important is that we move in the direction of a better culture fit in the materials we're creating. Okay. So a deblurred statement would be, and this is a really hard one, right? What does culture fit actually look like? And so that's going to be a much larger opportunity to figure out from an aesthetic perspective, what does culture fit actually look like? So that's a more complicated one. I'll give you actually a simpler one. Example would be, okay, I'll take this. Let's go back here. You need to be more proactive. Okay, it gets said a lot. I actually, when we ask executives, what's the one thing, if you could wave a magic wand over all your people, what would you most want them to be different? They always say, it's always the same thing, be more strategic. When I actually ask, what does proactivity look like? They'll say things like, well, they come to me with risks and problems before I find them. That would be an example, okay? Now I say, have you told your people that you actually want that? Like, do you actually want to be tapped and disturbed with those ideas? And they're like, yes. I'm like, then don't call it proactive. Just tell them the specific behavior you want. So that would be an example there. Yeah, so I'll keep us moving along here to make sure I don't hold up the rest of the folks coming after me. I'll end here with extract the learning. Now with that, I've got to give you an image. We're called like, I just simply love, I was lucky in school. I had really good lab classes. And, stuff like this was happening in those lab classes where you're trying to put under heat and maybe some pressure, you actually are able to distill out the most important stuff. So if you look over here, oh, it's not actually showing. Look at the distillate, right? Like that's the image I want you to have in your head. Each day, We want to end that day better than when we started. This conference that you're here at, this is a great opportunity. It won't be if you don't extract the learning. And what I mean by that, you can be like, that was cool or that was good, but if you don't convert it into an action, then we're not going to be able to benefit from that. So there's a few small things here. Questions like this should be regularly part of your vocabulary, no matter if you're leading or not. So what can we learn from? And fill in the blanks after it. But here's the next step. I want to combine everything we talked about, okay? Because whatever the person says, you've got a lot of other question options. Your question agility can hop in there. So for example, if I'm actually getting curious, what I might want to do is ask a scaling question. A scaling is on a scale from 1 to 10, how useful was this meeting? Now it's interesting if people put their hands up, right? Is it a 6? Your next question, this is a beautiful bit of scaling question. You should actually ask not what would make it a 10, but rather what would move it from a 6 to a 7. That's where you get your action. Okay, so this is the beauty of getting to good questions. And then also investigate their blur words, whatever they're saying. They're going to give you lots of blur words as to how to move it from that 6 to 7, and then convert it into action. So that's where we actually extract learning using all the skills we've covered so far. And then two last things here. One is extracting feedback. This question right here is one I want you to be asking all the time. Look at that last part there. What's 10% better? The beauty of that is that everybody has something they could tell you could be doing 10% better. So you'll get really rich feedback. And what we know from our research is people who pull feedback, who don't wait for feedback to be pushed onto them, they're perceived as leaders. It's going to very quickly change the way you're perceived. So I want you to, before they can give it to you, you come to them and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm doing good here, optimizing, whatever. Can you give me some feedback? And with that, we start to extract the learning. And then finally, with all of that, you'll always be in the habit of asking yourself, what's my one takeaway? Even from my too much stuff. I filled a lot of content. You got to pick one thing. And so my suggestion to you in the final end here is to turn to your neighbor once I'm done, and just simply turn to your neighbor and say your thing. Where you're going to say, I'm going to Q-step, or I'm going to de-blur, or I'm going to extract learning, whatever it came to. I'm going to do 20 questions. But I want you to say it out loud so that it becomes more of a reality. And so with that, we end the idea. Q-step, de-blur, pause to extract the learning. You are officially ordained question askers. I'm going to end right here. I will leave you with, oops, not that. Email address in case you have any questions, recommended reading, stuff like that. I love this topic. I'm super happy to help you. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, LeeAnn. This was wonderful. Wow, amazing.